Archibald, as I'm sure you'll all be aware, is in its 89th year at the moment. So it's really taken on something of its own character, and I think that's probably reflected of Archibald the man himself, because he was such a strong character, rabble-rouser, iconoclast. And always someone wants to have a go at the Archibald and wants to sort of offer their opinion on this or that, or the winner, or the selection, or the who's been grouped. And of course, we were very intrigued to see that there was an article very early in this year's prize, in March, by Andrew Taylor. And he was talking about a boys' club with brushes, women missing from the picture at the Archibald Prize. So we thought, well, maybe we'll get the winning women of the Archibald to come along, because we don't see them as being missing at all. And we'll have a bit of a discussion about it. There's a few facts. 8 women have won the Archibald Prize in the years. Of course, 19 have won prizes. That's including the People's Choice and the Packing Room Prize and those sorts of things. And there was 1,370 women's finalist entries have been made over the 89 years. We don't have exact figures on who, or the gender of people who apply or who submit something, so it's a bit hard to sort of gauge what the proportion is of winners and people who get hung or whatever. It's something of a much bigger study, but also going backwards, you're never going to know often what those people were, what their gender was. But my feeling is that less women apply for the prize, and that could be down to a whole range of sociological reasons. Certainly in the history of art schools have always been absolutely chock-a-block full of women. It's not that's the case now, but it certainly used to be the case. And the other thing about women was that they also spent a long time at art school, sometimes 15, 20 years. And it's not that they were a bit dumb or they didn't get their marks or anything like that. They were perfectly proficient. It's just that provided as a professional context, because the men could go out and meet with their buddies in the pub and have big art discussions or do whatever, but the women, it was not acceptable for them to have such those sorts of freedoms. And so going to art school was a way of actually being able to discuss art, and so they kept re-enrolling and re-enrolling and re-enrolling, and whereas the men would often stay there for a very short period of time because expectations on them were quite different. They were expected to go out and earn a living. Being an artist was considered a slightly effeminate thing to be doing, and they've got to be contributing to Australia's growth and going out there and earning a living. And so you'd find that a lot of male artists would go to art school for maybe 12 or 18 months or something, and then drop out and go off and become art stars. And they were quite precocious. So they had a totally different way of being in the world, and certainly being in the art world. And I've got a feeling that that's got something to do with wanting to apply for a prize or not, perhaps. But I'll throw it over to our winning women of the Archibald now. And I was just sort of wondering, Del, given that you're the most recent winner, perhaps, what was your experience of winning the prize? Did you get any sort of great headlines like winner of the Archibald Prize is a girl and she was found in the kitchen, as was written in the Daily Telegraph in 1939?
Oh, look, if only. I wish I did more cooking than I do. No, I definitely... Well, apart from the fact that the piece that I won the Archibald with was a self-portrait, and a self-portrait with my children, so the painting was, a celebration on so many different levels of my personal kind of femininity, I suppose. So that was, I think, for me, the most exaggerated sort of female kind of content or element of that particular experience. But certainly I didn't feel that being a woman was highlighted in that experience. But in saying that, I certainly was surprised to hear that I was only the eighth woman to have won the Archibald, and perhaps in my kind of ignorance and irreverence, but I would have absolutely assumed that more women would have been Archibald winners. Yeah.
And Sherry, you were the next in line, going backwards, of course. We're sort of going backwards through history.
No, I don't recall any headlines or articles
They
to
didn't
do
call
with
you a girl?
my gender particularly, no. And but just on the along the lines of what Del was talking about, it is interesting today that we can celebrate the feminine side of things and feminine side of our life in our art. Whereas, even just 20 years ago, that would have been the death knell to your career. So it's a step forward.
And Wendy, of course, you had a self-portrait as well, so for your winning Archibald.
I think you're trying to say that did they emphasise me being a woman?
Yeah. Did you get any great headlines,
I did. What I got was the fact that there was, in my painting, there were so many other things, but one of the things that was there was a bit of green bra strap. So artist with green bra walks away with prize. But it's, but that was fine. That didn't matter because that was all right. It wasn't girly, go back to the kitchen.
Well, I was wondering, do any of you winners have any idea about whether there's... What about my theory that perhaps women aren't so big on entering these kind of competitive prizes? Do you think that has any weight, or am I just barking up the wrong tree?
My initial response to that is that the female artists that I know are as ambitious as the male artists I know. So I wouldn't...
Doesn't sound
that as a filter doesn't really resonate for me, I must confess. Yeah, but you could be absolutely right.
Could be, but I feel that way too. I think that it's really hard to say when you were talking about that because we don't have the statistics from the earlier years. My guess, and it's only a guess, is that, as Del just said, that there would be a lot of women who would be going in for competitions now. I don't know what the percentage is, but I would imagine that in the past there would have been hardly any, and I think that's changed.
And to be, to put it down to sort of prime instinct or primal instincts, it's possible that men are a bit more ambitious still, that sometimes that's a bit more important to them to have these awards behind them. For me, I don't go chasing after awards to add them onto my CV. I just don't care. And I didn't even enter the Archibald to win. I didn't think I'd win. I thought I'd be entering for 14 years before I'd even get a look in. So it's possible that, because they're raised from this size, to be something, even today, boys are most often raised in a different way to girls, sadly.
So people talk about winning the Archibald Prize as being a big life-changing experience. Is that what happened with you, Wendy? Did you find that it was a really big change? Is there before and after Archibald?
I think it did make... Well, in terms of my career, it did make a huge difference to me. I had won other things beforehand, Portia Geach, the Sulman, and scholarships and things, but none of those have any comparison to the Archibald, the amount of attention that you get. What it mostly did was that not so much as kind of as a result of winning the Archibald, I got a lot of other things afterwards, various, I was an official artist to East Timor. I had a commission through the War Memorial, and there were other things like that, which I didn't get directly from winning the Archibald, but when they were recommending me to whoever, they could say, and she's won the Archibald. So it sort of gave me a tick of approval when I was applying for something or when someone wanted me to do something. So it is sort of a major thing on your CV.
And Del, did you find that it was really changing in that way?
I agree with Wendy insofar as, for me, it just has this really uncanny... it's the whole thing of mass appeal, and I think it legitimises you to a mass public, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, or whether that impacts or it doesn't impact, it's just kind of what it is. But certainly for me, I'd had a solo show open in Melbourne just a couple of days before I won the Archibald, and I think, thousands of people went to see that show who wouldn't have otherwise seen that show. So I would always advocate that for myself, like the greatest... the greatest thing about winning the Archibald for me is that it did bring a much broader audience to my work. And I think for most people, I mean, portraiture is such an idiosyncratic and unique and problematic genre that it's usually not that representative of your broader kind of practice or oeuvre, and certainly that is the case for me. So, I mean, often people, they might know you for the Archibald painting, but it doesn't necessarily represent your larger body of work. Mm-hmm. So I think it's great if people sort of have that kind of entry point, but then, they have to look further. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, and Sherry, what about your career? Was it very similar?
Yes, and I'd only been exhibiting for 2 years or less, really, when I won, and so it did launch me in a very unusual way, I suppose. That everybody knows your name from then on, and it's sort of a double-edged sword, because I felt for the next 2 years that I was treading water with my own practice, that I didn't have time to sort of develop my practice because there was so much interference coming from winning the Archibald. But on the other hand, most of that was good sort of interference and contact, and it was fairly unrelenting though for years that I felt I didn't have time to really think straight about my own work and my own practice.
Mm. Mm. Well, the media crush, which is what we always see of being characteristic of the Archibald, that must be quite an extraordinary thing to experience, to suddenly be, this kind of celebrity. Exactly. I mean, Wendy, how did you deal with that?
It is terrifying, because I think that they now give you a little bit of warning when you've won, but when I won, they gave you no warning at all. So, at all, which is actually stupid, because, some people could just freak out utterly. And I was at the press, the announcement, which is in the midday before they do, that's when they do the formal announcement of it. And I'd got a phone call to ask if I was going. So I thought there was a possibility that I might have got something, or they might be considering me for something. But I was also the Doe Bell was running at the same time. I had 2 drawings in that, and I also had something in the Sulman. So I thought, because I had 2 things in the Doe Bell, I thought maybe I've either won the Doe Bell or I'm considered for it or something. And so I thought, well, that's good. Anyway, so I went along, and I was a long way back from when they were doing the announcements. And when they said the Doe Bell, which they did first, and it wasn't me, I thought, oh, fine, I was totally relaxed. And then when they said the runners-up are whoever, and the winner is Wendy Sharpe, I was a hell of a long way, as far away as I could be, and it was just surged to the front, shoved in front of your painting, and 100... microphones and cameras in front of you, just like that. It's actually silly. I mean, I could speak, but some people would just burst into tears, and that's not. And you could see why. It's extraordinary, because all of us would say that as an artist that, you want, you were just about to have a show. You said you want attention, but do you want that? It's particularly when you're not told. You need a bit of warning. But, yeah, there was no warning. It was an incredible shock.
Big, sort of thrown in the deep end kind of experience.
It's incredible.
Sherry, did you have any inkling at all? Or did you just sort of get that big wave of media?
Exactly the same. Really, just dropped me right in it.
So that's like you were just there and they did it. Yeah.
I had an hour's warning.
Yeah, they do an hour. They did that. They didn't do that. They didn't do it. They introduced that. They didn't do the hour's warning. They had not 1 minute.
Yeah. No.
An hour.
An hour.
I had nothing.
Well, enough time to sort of do your hair, I guess.
No.
That's right.
I was wearing a nice dress because I thought there was a possibility I'd won the Doe Bell. So otherwise, I would have been wearing something else.
But it must be very intense going from, especially in the studio. I mean, most people work quite in isolation in the studio. It's not like you're there with an audience, and then suddenly to be so intensely in the spotlight, I would find that really quite difficult. Yeah. And Del, and you had your kids as well to sort of, they were also in the spotlight. So that was kind of a whole family affair. How was your experience?
Yeah, definitely for me it was, there were two sides to that experience, because as a mother it's that, incredibly sort of protective energy around you have around your children, and so I felt that was in overdrive as well, but then, also feeling incredibly exposed myself. But I think, and perhaps selfishly so, my daughter was quite young. She's still young, she's 4 now, but, she was 2 at the time, and, she was just kind of clutched to my chest, and so I was actually just holding her the whole time, and actually I think that had a very grounding effect on me, because I was sort of in mother mode at the same time. But a strange thing to expose your children to also.
How did she find the cameras?
Well, she was looking away. She was probably looking at herself in the painting and had her back to the cameras, and I was like this. So
she was a little bit unaware of it. Yeah. And what about the follow-up too? Because it's not just that huge rush on the day. It just seems to sort of go on and on for a while, doesn't it? Yeah. But what sort of impact did that have on family life for a while?
Oh, look, raising children is such a kind of perfunctory, practical experience. I think that it's kind of a blur in my memory, to be honest. I don't think it impacted. I'm so used to kind of managing the work-family divide that I don't think it sort of impacted any more than, the normal demands of my studio practice already impacted. Yeah.
And Sherry, did you find that there was sort of much of a sort of afterglow after that first rush?
Yeah, well, I just had hundreds and hundreds of letters, thousands of emails, thousands of phone calls. I couldn't even, my husband had my phone. I couldn't handle the phone. I couldn't handle anything, really. And and then, and that just went on and on and on for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I had people coming out of the woodwork from my childhood and from my my first job, and and all these people were my best friend suddenly, and it was pretty weird, actually. Yeah. And gifts. People were sending me gifts, and people came up to me and gave me gifts for winning the Archibald. It's really strange.
It's a very nice gesture.
Yeah. It's very interesting. It's a strange sort of human experiment, the Archibald Prize, isn't it?
Yeah, big petri dish.
It's very
big Archibald petri
very
dish.
Unusual.
And Wendy, what about you? What was the sort of after effects for you with the prize?
Like Sherry just said, it was certainly non-stop, and everyone you've ever known, people you don't even know, people who you met at a party 20 years ago, is saying, hello, do you remember me? And I got tons and tons of cards. The answering machine was full over and over and over. It was just masses and masses of stuff and unbelievable attention. All sorts of weird things, like you're talking about gifts, weird things like being offered by State Rail to take a rail holiday somewhere to Melbourne. I went to see Beauty and the Beast, which was in Melbourne, and then write about it. Just ridiculous. Lots of weird things, lots of TV appearances and all that. And I felt like it was interesting, and then it was actually hard going because it was just too much. And I also felt like a charlatan because all the time I was there talking about painting and I wasn't actually doing any. And I was getting resentful. I was getting resentful. So I decided, and I think it was good, I'd put a time frame and I said, I'm going to do this until whatever month and then that's it. And then I'll hardly do. And that's what I did. And that was actually good because if I knew that it was going to stop, it was... as I say, it's crazy. It sounds ungrateful because all artists want people to see their work, but it's hard to imagine how much attention that you get. And for the weekend, because I was on the cover of every paper, and like I was even in West Australia, it wasn't the cover, but it was everywhere. Everywhere I went that weekend that I'd won, people knew me and were saying, "Oh, you're the guy, you won this." And it gave me a tiny insight into what it would be like to be really famous. And it made me think it would be pretty horrible, actually. I mean, most people are saying nice things to you when people are really nice. But, you just, you're sitting in a cafe and people are all lovely and friendly, but it's still sort of unnerving.
It feels like they want a piece of it.
Yeah, it's sort of unnerving. And
like.
It wouldn't be nice to be Nicole Kidman. Even though I had a minute. Had her for a minute.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember Brett Whiteley, who was someone who wasn't actually all that shy of attention. He quite liked a lot of attention, and he won the trifecta of the Archibald Wynne and Sulman ones. And the first thing he did, he didn't even come to the gallery to receive his prize. The first thing he did was just go off into the country, disappear. I mean, he was so overwhelmed by it. And as I say, he's someone who, loves the attention.
That's
so, I mean, his personality was, you would think he'd be the one who'd be there lapping it up, but he absolutely shrank from it. So I've always thought that must be such an intense experience. Yeah. And other people have said that, it interferes with your work, and it's a nice thing, but it's also very extreme. But of course, it's not just the sort of the immediate media that's you're dealing with too, because you are also being written into Australian art history as well, and that's kind of got quite a monumental quality to it as well. Do you think about it like that, Wendy? Did you sort of think of yourself as suddenly, right? Well, that's it. I'm in the history books now.
No,
I've just introduced it. What do you think about that?
No, I'm sorry to answer you with a one-word answer. No, I didn't really think of it, although, I'm aware of it now, I suppose. I mean, it's interesting we're here talking about the rarity of women to win, so I suppose that's, you've got a good percentage of us here, which is pretty shocking because we're all sitting in a row.
Almost half.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
Janet Dawson is the only other one that's still with us.
Except Judy's still.
Judy Kassab, of course. Judy Kassab did
but
twice.
But what I will say, just on Judy Kassab, which is off the track of your question, just briefly, is a couple of years ago, because I've met Judy, I was wearing this, I knew Judy slightly, I was wearing a bright yellow sort of Chinese jacket thing, which appealed to her, and she said, could you wear that and I'll paint a portrait of you? And she painted a portrait of me, which was really fascinating because when she paints, and I'm not a portrait painter, I paint people, but I'm not a portrait painter, she is. But what she does is she actually talks to the sitter all the time that she's painting, which is quite extraordinary because I don't know how she can concentrate, but that's what she does, or she did, So we'd have these amazing conversations, and she told me so many fascinating, this absolutely fascinating woman, and a real insight into the art scene, 50s, 60s, 70s, and also what we're talking about, which is to do with being a woman and doing all those incredibly brave things that she did at a time when, women just didn't do them.
I like this idea of painting a portrait as a conversation.
Yeah, she'd actually talk. She would say, "So why do you?" And I'd say, "Do you really want me to answer?" She'd say, "Oh no." She said she had a beautiful expression which I shouldn't try to say because I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's something like, "I catch the words as they leave your lips" or something. But it was something about. But when you're painting, you can't really talk at the same time because you're thinking. You can't. But Judy could.
Yeah, that's
interesting. A bit more practice.
It's multi-skilling, you see.
Yeah.
And Sherry, what about you? Did you have a sense of going into the history books?
Yes, I was mentioning before that I met Nora Hassan when I think it might have been one of the Archibald events just after, or sometime around the time, and Judy Kassab together, and that was just such a thrill for me because I'd always adored Nora Hassan's paintings, and to meet her, and I actually did not know she was still alive at the time, and I was just blown away by that and had to have my photo taken with both of them, and that is a treasure. And sort of that made me feel a bit along those lines. I didn't really think about it at the time, but
yeah, I don't mean in the sense of it being a kind of a self-aggrandising thing, but just that because the Archibald has got such a strong history, but now your name's in there. I have to say, before I won, I didn't realise how powerful the Archibald was.
No, you
and
don't,
how popular.
You don't realise. You actually
And-
have to experience it to know
Yeah,
what attention you get.
and how broadly known it is. Yeah,
Yeah, I think we
had
tend
no
to take it
idea.
for granted. But
Yeah.
what about you, Del? You know what I'm going to ask.
Certainly, I think, my one anecdote that was very meaningful to me was, receiving a card from, a very well-known Australian artist who had won the Archibald in the past, and, his work, I had looked at a lot, and I think that was a very special moment for me, and felt, as I said, that was very meaningful. I don't know, I think that it is such an overwhelming experience. I think you kind of, I don't know if it's just me, but I've edited out a lot, and I actually had very pressing deadlines that followed very close on the heels, so I think that I was kind of back in the studio very fast, and that maybe sustained me, and
Because you were winning in a different area altogether at the time, because your art was becoming so famous and so well known apart from the Archibald.
It was
right
a
at the
very
same
heady
time.
week, because actually I had been commissioned to do a cover for Art in Australia, and that cover had come out that same week, and a solo show in Melbourne. So
Wow. Good
and I think there was something else actually, but so it was huge
Yeah,
actually. Yeah. But as I said before, I think for me personally, with young children in the mix, I'm really just back at home at the end of the day, and you're kind of in a different mode, and so I think that I have these sort of kind of walls.
Yeah, they were very grounding in that way. Yeah. And so, did it sort of change in terms of, I suppose, in terms of the commissions that you might have got? I mean, Wendy, you've done a lot of commission work as well.
Well, I don't do commissions normally, so not really, but I've had 2 commissions. I don't do portrait commissions.
They're just prominent.
Yeah, it's prominent, because I don't actually do portraits. The 2 things that I've done is that I as I mentioned before, I got a commission from the Australian War Memorial in Canberra as an official artist to East Timor, which, as I said, wasn't actually a result of it, but because they chose me because they'd seen my drawings, but when they were trying to sell me to the Defence Department or whoever was coming up with the money, they could say, and she's won the Archibald. And the other thing was the Olympic pool-size mural that I have at Cook and Phillip Park here it's in our College Street. And again, the architect chose me because he'd been to some exhibitions of mine, but when he was trying to sell me to the City of Sydney, who were financing it, he could say, and she's won the Archibald. So both of them were helped by that. They were kind of a result of it, but I think they're 2 examples of all kinds of,
you need a career to hang it on
helps,
in the first place. Yeah.
It helps, that's right. But for them to, otherwise it's very superficial. If they're only judging you by one painting, it's a very stupid thing to do. But, that could happen.
And Sherry, did you have any idea when you were coming out of art school that perhaps you would, you'd get into the Archibald Prize? Was this something that you indeed went through art school thinking this is what I want to do one day?
I was painting large faces, and they weren't really portraits of anybody, and so it was just sort of a natural thing to just put something in the Archibald, and art-wise, not really. I mean, I still get asked to do portraits. I do accept portrait commissions of children, so I like painting children, and it doesn't, it's no sort of problem. But I was off overseas pretty well straight after, within a year or so, and working away. So I didn't get any big commissions out of it.
Yeah, well,
But even though a lot of these people, that are saying, "Can you paint my child?" would be thinking, "She's won the Archibald."
Yeah,
they would be. Even they're going to like it in the first place, but they're more likely to.
Yes.
I think it can help.
Yes, they wouldn't have asked me otherwise. They definitely wouldn't have.
Rightly or wrongly.
Well, sometimes people win the Archibald almost, by chance, in a way. We think of John Olsen, who had that wonderful portrait, Janus, self-portrait as Janus. And that painting had actually come into the gallery that day, the last day of entries for the Archibald, because he was having a small project show up there on the ground level, and he'd painted this painting especially for that project exhibition. And then at the last minute, he saw all of these paintings being submitted to the Archibald on the Friday, the last day, and he thought, oh no, I think I'll put this one on the Archibald instead. So it was just that split second, kind of by accident. And he put another one in the project exhibition, and then he won the Archibald with it. So it was sort of like accidental Archibald, really. Del, did you feel a bit like that one with your painting? Did you sort of think about entering that one in the Archibald for a long time, or was it kind of, oh, let's just give it a go?
To be honest, the self-portrait with my children was a painting that I'd sort of been hoping to make ever since I became a mother, and entering, I mean, my life is so kind of deadline driven and so kind of time shy that I always need a very specific reason to make a work. And so actually working towards the deadline of entering the Archibald was kind of my perfect excuse to make this painting for myself, actually. And I really was very surprised to have won with such a personal work.
Yes, well, it was certainly very well received, and I think everyone quite appreciated that personal nature. But then all of your works have had a very strong sense of intimacy. I mean, even though quite large paintings, all three, but all had a very strong sense of intimacy as well.
I just have to tell you a story about Del's painting. I live just near Goulburn, and they have a theatre group in Goulburn, and they when the Archibald came to Goulburn, to the regional gallery there, they dressed up as the characters in the paintings. The theatre group were all in costume in front of each painting for the opening. And it was absolutely incredible to see the mother and the children there were 3 children, and they were all made up to look like Del and her children. It was pretty amazing and really, really beautiful. Wow. I mean, it was a homage to your painting. It wasn't tacky at all. Wow. And none of them were tacky. They were just incredible and such a different thing to do.
Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah, that sounds great. I really like that as a public program. Yeah. I think we should institute that one here for next year. It sounds really great. Now, Wendy, what about your experience of coming out of art school and deciding on forging a career as a painter? Were you thinking at that point of Archibald?
No, just thinking of painting. The painting that I won the Archibald with, I never actually, because I don't, even though I paint people, I don't actually paint portraits of people. So they're all, if there's anyone in it known, it's either me or it could be a friend or something, as opposed to a famous person. So when I've been in the Archibald, it's always been because I've had one, as opposed to I'm doing one specially. So that was a painting that I had, and I was thinking, if I've got something, I'll put it in. And I thought, oh well, maybe I could put that in the Sulman Prize. That was what I'd intended. And then I thought, oh, it's more portraity, I'll put it in that. No, it wasn't done specially for it. It's just if I have something that's suitable, I will put it in. But otherwise, I don't do them specially.
It's a bit accidental too.
Yeah, to an extent, yeah.
Now, Sherry, yours was of
Simon.
Simon Tedeschi.
No, I definitely went after Simon with the Archibald in mind.
In mind, yes.
Yeah.
And was that what interested him in sitting for you?
Or? He probably would have done it anyway. But when I approached him, he said, and he was 20 at the time, he said, it's about time somebody asked me, to have my portrait painted.
Such a long career.
Just been waiting for them. He's such a character. I mean, he actually got me through the whole process because he's a great raconteur. He's got a wicked sense of humour. And and it was great fun working with him and everything. So, yes, I definitely planned it.
Well, I was wondering whether maybe... Some of you have been sitting here with burning questions that you'd like to... Yes, we've got a hand up already, so I guessed it right. Yes, what would you like to... Now we're asking Sherry if she started large, painting the portrait of Simon Tedeschi large, or whether she worked it up from very small drawings first.
Yes, I photographed him I had about 60 photographs, and I used about 5 of them to... and what I do is make a grid on the photograph to proportion it up to such a huge scale. And then I had him sitting, but really the sitting was pretty tricky because I only did it to fit into the requirements, actually. And I was running up and down a ladder to paint and come down, and I was actually really trying to get the colour of his eye while I had him there.
Yeah.
And a few of those colours that you can't get from a photograph, but basically the drawing was there, and so a bit of each. And I never work small because so much of my work is all about the huge scale. So yeah.
Sherry's also very famous in the history of the Archibald Prize because her painting was the last winner to be allowed into the Archibald Prize without a size restriction. After that, there was a size restriction put on paintings with the hope of being able to get them through the various doors and actually fitting on the walls. It was a substantial painting, it certainly was. Yes? Oh, just one second.
I'd just like to ask if many of you entered the Archibald before not being accepted within the paintings, and how you cope with not being accepted.
Well, Wendy, you haven't answered a question yet. So this one is about how many times?
I hadn't. When I had been accepted twice before I won, and they were the first. I was accepted the first time I went in, and I was in it 3 times in a row and then won. Since then, I haven't put everything. I haven't, as I said, I only put something in if I have something, and I've not been in it a few times when I've been in the Salon de Refusé. So. But I mean, look, I've been in, but lots of competitions I've got in for and not got in, over the years. So it is the nature of it, and you can't, and you have to. Yes, everyone does, and then you can go and see whatever competition and think, oh, I should have got in. But it doesn't. It actually, it's, and having judged lots of competitions, including I once judged the Sulman Prize, you realise how there really is a degree of pot luck involved in it. I mean. Because there's so many paintings, so although it's great to get in, and obviously it's brilliant to win, there is always a degree of chance.
Yeah, you have to have a thick skin.
Yeah, you do.
Do these
you
things.
have to. You have to.
It's a very tough thing, I think.
Rejection is definitely a skill set that an
part of
artist
it.
needs to understand. I was rejected, I think, 8 years in a row from the Sulman Prize. So yeah, you've got to have tenacity.
Yeah, actually, a Sulman Prize rejection story I can give you. There used to be a competition that's no longer around. It was a scholarship. It was the Mode Chandon scholarship. It's gone now. And the first year that was going, I put a work in that. It got rejected, but it was rejected on the same day that you could take it and put it in the Sulman. It was being rejected in Sydney, even though it was in Melbourne. It was being rejected in Sydney, so I could get it and take it here and won with the same. It's a good story. Wow. It's true, and it's just there's always a degree of. But if there'd been, and that was the year that Albert Tucker was judging it. If there'd been a different judge, it would have been rejected probably from that. So it's a lot of it's. There is always a degree of chance, and you just have to think, oh, well, the main thing is if you are interested in going in for things like that, you need to do lots of them because then it's water off a duck's back.
Yeah, you get used to the rejection.
And Sherry, have you got much of a track record in terms of knockbacks, like most artists?
I entered the year before I won, and I was hung, and that was what drove me to do something, pretty amazing to see if I could get hung again, not thinking it would win, but just to get hung. I thought, you've really got to knock their socks off just to get hung in this thing. Because the year before it was the first watercolour that had ever been hung, and it was the first work on paper, and I got a lot of really good press out of it, and I thought, oh, this is cool, and it was the year after Adam Cullen had won. So that's what prompted me to enter.
Okay, well, I think we might leave it there, and I think it's a big boisterous prize, and it certainly captures everyone's imaginations. It's such a huge thing, and as these women have found out, it is just so enormously popular right across the country. It's really on everyone's lips, and I think it'd be great if we had a lot more women submitting paintings and a lot more women hopefully winning. So could you please join me in thanking our wonderful women artists tonight. Wendy Sharpe, Sherry Hood and Kathryn Barton. So thank you very much.